Good morning. I'm Rosalie Schaefer, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County, I welcome you to our hot topic today. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that is very much in the news these days, immigration reform. We are a nation of immigrants. My father was one of them. He came from Italy with not much money in his pockets, but he went on to build Liberty ships, get married, and raise 4 daughters. He's still grumbling about that. But he loved girls, he says. That was a different era, though. Unusual for any issue, there is much agreement that the current system is not working well. There is a lot of disagreement about what to do about it. To summarize some of the issues, here's what one side says. Undocumented workers are entering our country in large numbers. It has been estimated by several agencies that there are about 800,000 in Florida alone and 12 million nationwide. Many Americans object to the use of public funds for their subsistence, schooling, and medical care. Yet many industries complain that they cannot get the workers they need, and the existing guest worker program is largely a failure. On the other side of the coin is the human toll of the current system. Many immigrants become ill or die just trying to enter. Children born here may be separated from their parents, who can be deported. According to news reports, in the first half of 2011 alone, nearly 46,500 parents of U.S.-born children were forced to leave the country. Also, children may be brought here while young, grow up here, but then are unqualified for jobs, to drive, or to get in-state tuition. Worse yet, some undocumented workers are subject to abuse and cannot complain due to fear of deportation. What can be done to make the system work better? Should there be an earned path to citizenship? We are very pleased to have with us today to discuss these issues Beatriz Paniego Bejar, pardon me if I mispronounced that, Communications Director of Unidos Now, Immigration Attorney Maria Mata-Rule, and Bob Spencer of West Coast Tomato, based in Palmetto. After their presentations, we will invite questions from the audience. At that point, please use the microphone on the floor for your question and state your name. Okay, without further ado, we will have Maria.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Mata-Rule. I am an immigration attorney. There's a little bit of feedback. Do you hear that? And I also practice criminal defense. A little bit about me. I was born in Venezuela. I am the youngest of 7 girls. And we immigrated from Venezuela in 1981. So I am a naturalized U.S. citizen, and I became naturalized through Reagan's amnesty in 1986. My husband was born in Ohio, but his ancestors immigrated from Germany. I love to hear that we're a nation of immigrants, because every time I listen to the news or speak to anyone, I always feel that's lost in all the conversations. We are a nation of immigrants, and we're a young nation of immigrants. We were under British rule before we became the United States of America. And I think that's just so often forgotten. It makes me crazy. It makes me so angry. But I was asked to speak to how and why we should reform our immigration laws. I want to address the why first. And to understand the why we should reform our immigration laws, we need to first remember the history of our immigration laws. Immigration law is second to our tax code, is so complex and so very confusing. it's hard to narrow it down. I'm going to start with just a brief timeline on a little bit of our immigration policy on naturalization and so forth. In 1790, Congress adopted uniform rules so that any free white person could apply for citizenship after 2 years of residency. So anybody living here that was free and white was a citizen. That excluded indentured servants, slaves, and women. I know. As an aside, in researching the history of when women were allowed to become naturalized citizens, there is so much that weren't on the books because women were we were second-class citizens. It was very interesting in learning that. In 1880, more than 5.2 million immigrants entered the country between 1880 and 1890. In 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which barred Chinese immigration for 10 years and barred all Chinese in the U.S. from citizenship. Also barred were convicts, lunatics, and others unable to care for themselves from entering. In 1892, Ellis Island opened to screen immigrants entering on the East Coast. Ellis Island officials reported that women traveling alone must be met by a man or they were immediately deported. In 1903, anarchists, epileptics, polygamists, and beggars were ruled inadmissible. 1905 began the construction of Angel Island Immigration Station in California. It was pretty much designed to control the flow of Chinese into the country because they were not welcome. In 1907, people with physical or mental defects and children unaccompanied by a parent were added to the exclusion list. In 1910, the Dillingham Report from Congress assumed inferiority of new immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. In 1917, an Immigration Act provided for literacy tests for those over 16 and established an Asiatic barred zone, which barred all immigrants from Asia. In 1922, the Japanese were made ineligible for citizenship. In 1943, the Chinese exclusion laws were repealed. Then came, I'm pointing out just a few things. There's been so much in between. There was a period of time that the laws were designed to bar immigration of Jews from Russia and Catholics from Poland. We've gone through a lot as a nation. In 1986, the Immigration Reform and Control Act provided for amnesty for many undocumented and sanctions for employers hiring illegals. I think it's assumed that there was between 3 and 5 million people that were undocumented at the time. I believe about 3 million adjusted their status to that of permanent residents, and a good majority of those became naturalized citizens. Then there was another reform in 1996. The laws changed significantly as to the due process rights of undocumented people living here. Now, one thing that I hear a lot from Americans when I don't know how many people I speak to, but at least 5 to 10 times a week, I have to go through I have to address the question of, well, why can't they just become legal? Why not? You know, they cut our lawns, they pick the tomatoes, they clean our homes. Why can't they just become legal? I can help them. I can help my maid. I'll sponsor her. It is so difficult in today's laws for someone to legalize. Most of our ancestors would not have qualified today under our immigration laws to become residents. They would have been excluded. It is a very complex system. It could take upwards of 20 years for some people, especially those from Mexico, the Philippines, China, and India. You have to have an immediate relative. There's certain things that will bar you. You have to be a highly skilled worker. There's numerical limitations. It is very complex. Until the late 19th century, there was very little federal regulation of immigration. So there was pretty much no laws to break like there are today. Before immigration, it was free-flowing. Nobody was worried about it. The first numerical caps on immigration were not established until the 1920s, after the great wave of immigration to the U.S. Every restriction that the United States has passed has generated illegal immigration. So the U.S. just still hasn't figured it out. And rather than being proactive, they're reactive into how the laws are addressed. And we forget that many Europeans, immigrants benefited from amnesties. Nobody likes the A word. Amnesty is not a bad word. It's been used before. It's addressed problems in the 1920s. Roughly 115,000 immigrants registered between 1930 and 1940. 80% were European or Canadian. And between 1925 and 1965, 200,000 illegal Europeans legalized their status through the Registry Act. And approximately 73% of people that benefited from suspension of deportation were Europeans, mostly Germans and Italians. Those laws just do not exist today. I have a small handout, and I made a few copies for those who are interested, as to why they don't come here legally, and somebody much smarter than I created this. I just borrowed it off the internet. It explains who can, it's a small flow chart of who can immigrate into the U.S. and how. You have to have a legal family member to petition, depending on where you're from. Let's say you are a U.S. citizen you're born in Mexico, and you have brothers and sisters in Mexico, and you want to petition for them. It will take you, right now, it'll take you as long as 20 years. There's people that have been waiting. And then, the worst part is, in our ever-changing immigration system, sometimes when you think your year is up, it retrogresses, and it goes back a year. So you can make no plans. It's a little disturbing. You can't make plans for it. If you have jobs or skills, if you have job skills and a qualified employment offer, you may be able to benefit from an employer petition. There's approximately 140,000 employment-based visas each year. They're usually for persons of extraordinary ability in the arts, sciences, education, business, or athletics, persons holding advanced degrees. There's not a whole lot for agriculture and those people who just provide basic labor that are in such demand here. However, if you invest half a million dollars to create jobs, you'll get a visa pretty easy. So there's also asylum for those fleeing persecution, but that's also not very easy to prove nor to receive. You have a year within entering the country to apply for asylum. Most people don't find out until after the year, maybe 3 or 4 years later after speaking to an attorney, and it is so hard to prove. It is so hard if you have a woman who's fleeing from domestic violence, and they come here and they ask for proof. Well, what proof can you get? You didn't live in the United States where almost everything's available on the internet or with a phone call and they can fax it to you. It doesn't happen that way. So it makes it very hard to ask for asylum. And there's also the diversity visa lottery, which makes 55,000 green cards available to certain people that meet certain qualifications that come from a select part of the countries. There's also protection for women, well, for spouses of U.S. citizens or permanent residents who are abused. Those people will be able to benefit from our laws. Our laws do protect them. Our laws do protect the victims of crimes. So that is two things that are very good, that help the unfortunate segment of society that need help. Apart from legal immigration, you also have another way to enter through temporary work visas, student visas, or visitors visas that allow you to stay for a specified amount of time. However, once you come here and you see how great it is, everybody wants to stay. And the next question is, well, how can I stay? I found a job, I'm learning English. Well, you can't. You can't, it is very hard. So the laws are almost designed to encourage you to stay because it is so difficult. Some people are willing to pay whatever kind of fine to stay here, to jump through whatever hoops. It's just simply not that easy. So that's just a cheat sheet that's available on the back. I made a few copies for anybody that's interested.
Could you give us the website for that?
This one I got off of www.immigrationpolicy.org. And it was prepared by the Immigration Policy Center in Washington, D.C. But feel free to pick up a copy in the back.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, how should we reform our laws? I don't know, but I'm sure if you pay me to analyze and research, I'll come up with a fabulous plan. But I can tell you that however we do it, we have to start with firm and fair enforcement of our laws and secure our borders. The securing the borders is something that we hear a lot on television. It's a problem. It's a problem for the border states. We're not a border state, so we're not faced with the same type of problems that Arizona and California and Texas are faced with, but we do have a lot of immigrants. I mean, I think we're fourth behind California, Texas, and Jersey and New York. I think we're fourth behind. So we have a lot of undocumented people here. But whatever we do, we need fair and firm enforcement, and we have to be real. I read an article yesterday, and it escapes me from where, about a sheriff in one of the border towns that was saying, there is no problem here. They're pouring all this money into the border, and it's safe here. We have it under control. You know, we listen to the media reports. Maybe there has to be a better comprehensive study done with, you know, places outside of Maricopa County in Arizona, because other people don't seem to complain as much as that one county. Our enforcement policies should focus on the critical task of establishing a safe and orderly system of entry into the U.S. that meets the needs of families and businesses alike, with a priority of identifying and preventing the entry of terrorists and dangerous criminals. I think everybody understands we don't want people that harm the United States. But in this whole goal of deporting the undocumented, they're not deporting people that are involved in criminal activity only. I think upwards of 50% is what statistics show or the numbers show that it's people without criminal histories, people that are torn from their families. A lot of men. And now if I have to base it just on my real life experience, there is more than 50% of the people that are being deported that have no criminal history. I don't believe the numbers that I see every day based on my everyday work in a small town. And if I take my own statistics, they don't coincide with what the media doesn't, or with what the media reports or fails to report. It's absurd. You have families, men are more likely to be deported because I think the thinking is the women have the kids, they have to stay and take care of the kids. That's fine and well, but if you have the man who's the provider, now you're leaving a home without a provider and a woman with kids who has no license because the undocumented aren't allowed to drive, although they have the ability to get insurance, and most of them do, car insurance. So we don't want them on welfare. So what are these families to do? Especially when you have young kids. Most of these people don't rely on government help. From my personal experience, my mother never, ever relied on government help. She has 7 girls. Her husband took off. She didn't speak English. She did what she had to do. We all have a higher education. 3 of us have post-bachelor's education. We've all paid our own ways. Most of these countries believe in wanting to do it for themselves. They don't rely on the government. So some of these reports that you hear that the immigrants come and they just suck up all our resources and we give all this money to them, it's just simply not true. It's simply not true. But when push comes to shove, they're going to have to rely on government help if they lost their family provider. So we need firm and fair enforcement of the laws. We need to consider family reunification. And we also need a meaningful way to address the future flow of workers into the US. Whether you're on one side or the other, the undocumented are going to come in to work and are going to be encouraged to stay because they're going to find the jobs that other Americans aren't willing to do, and it has to be addressed. And that is all I have.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Rosalind said, I'm Beatriz Paniego Bejar. I am from Spain. I've been living in Florida for 4 years now. And it was interesting for me coming from Spain to earn a new identity when I came here. I didn't know that I was Hispanic. Because in Spain, we don't talk about race that much. And when people from Latin America go there to Spain, they are also immigrants. And they face the same difficulties that they face here. So it was really interesting for me to learn that new identity that I didn't know I had, and also relate to their struggles and feel some of their struggles on my own person as an immigrant myself in this country. So that's why I got really involved in working with the Hispanic community and helping them to overcome all these struggles. And that's how I got involved with Unidos Now, a nonprofit that works with the Hispanic community to elevate their quality of life and helping especially young students to reach their dreams. 3/4 of all immigrants are women and children. This is Blanca Trejo. Blanca arrived in the United States 14 years ago. She came from a place in Mexico called Querétaro, and for what she told me, there were no opportunities for her there. That's why she decided to leave all behind and just take the risk to cross the border and come and live in the United States for a better chance of her future. Nearly 60% of all undocumented women work in what is known as the informal economy here in the United States. Caregivers, domestic workers, but no Blanca. Blanca arrived in Palmetto in 2000 and she went to the farms to pick up tomatoes. And her plan was actually just to be here for a few years, make some money, and go back to her home country with her family where she needed to support them. But then she met her husband, and then she had these beautiful 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons. The oldest daughter says that she wants to be a veterinarian, and the youngest one wants to be a teacher. The youngest son wants to be an artist, and Blanca always says that her youngest son is going to be the next president of the United States. They are all Americans because they were born here. But Blanca fears every day that she's gonna lose them because she's undocumented. And she's heard the stories, as Maria was saying, of parents being deported from this country and they leave their families behind. She's scared of that, and that's why she doesn't drive, and her life is just around her home. She lives there and just takes care of the children. That's what she does, because she just wants to do that, to give them a better chance for the kids. There are roughly now, I know you said that there are 12 million undocumented immigrants, but they put that number down to 11 because from since the economic crisis, a lot of people have gone back to their countries, and actually the border crossing from Mexico has fallen basically to net zero. So roughly now they think that there are 11 million undocumented immigrants, and since in the last 5 years, during the Obama administration, 400,000 people have been deported every year. And many of them, as Maria Mata said, are hardworking parents that leave American children behind. And so Blanca's story repeats all over again, from Mexico to San Diego and from Washington, D.C. to Seattle. It is the story of the American dream, of people that come here just looking for a better opportunity for their lives. And right now, 11 million people's lives are at stake. As you know, the Senate passed a bill, bipartisan bill, that would give undocumented immigrants a pathway to citizenship. That pathway will take them roughly 13 years. So it won't be something that it'll be right away. They will have to pay their taxes back, they will have to do background checks, they will have to prove that know English, etc., etc. So you ask about the differences between amnesty and pathway to citizenship. Probably, if you want to think about that, it'll be that with the pathway to citizenship, they are going to really ask them to prove that they are contributors to the U.S. Unfortunately, that bill hasn't go forward. Now it's stuck in the House of Representatives, and it doesn't seem that it's going to go anywhere. They want to actually break down immigration reform, not to do it comprehensive, but a piecemeal, as they call it. Do first maybe the security of the border, then talk about what to do with the undocumented immigrants, and fix all the visas that, as you heard coming from Maria, that it is so difficult, they put numbers, etc., etc. So that is the debate that is being going on among the House of Representatives. But right now, it seems that it is pretty stopped and that nothing is going to actually happen this year as we thought it might. So, but the Senate bill was going to fix all that broken immigration system. And the broken immigration system that we have now that doesn't even allow Steve Jobs to get workers for Apple. And that is the system that keeps families apart. Actually, there are 4 million people living abroad, waiting to be reunited with their families, as Maria was saying. 4 million people that are waiting outside the United States, just waiting to be reunited with their families. Just imagine, I can go back to Spain quite often. I'm fortunate like that, but I miss my family every day. Imagine yourself being without them. So these people that have to wait for so many years to be reunited, I don't even know how they do it. And Blanca told me as well, like, she hasn't seen her mother in 14 years. The mother doesn't know her grandchildren. That is just heartbroken. It breaks my heart. And also this system that we have now, it's educating many people in the country, but then they do not have an option. Like Maria was saying, they get a visa to come and study in our universities. And then even if they find a job, it's difficult for them to keep going with another visa to stay. It is a very, very broken system. So it is true that these 11 million undocumented people broke the law, that they came here without a visa, or that they overstayed the ones that they had. But they were here, and they are here because they are needed labor. They work in the fields, they work in our landscape, cleaning our houses. They are entrepreneurs, or they are the future doctors and lawyers. I don't know if you heard the story of Jose Manuel Godinez. He is a dreamer. A dreamer is a child that came here when they were kids, brought by their parents. Their parents didn't have documents, the kids don't have documents, but they go to school here, and after they finish high school, they do not have any other chances. What are they gonna do after? They can go to university, but it will cost them thousands of dollars because they do not have documents. They will count as international students, and those fees are incredibly high. But Jose Manuel Godinez did it. He got scholarships, he worked hard, and so he graduated as a lawyer and even passed the bar here in Florida. And what he was asking is that to get a license to practice law. And the Florida court just said last Tuesday that it cannot happen, that they cannot give him a license to practice law. A bright person that can bring so much to the country that we are not giving them a chance. Some of the students that we work with, they are undocumented, and now they could apply for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That is a program that Obama put in place in 2012, and it was going to give these dreamers a 2-year permit that will give them a social security number and the chance for many of them to go to college. Here in Florida, the things are trickier, and many of these students cannot actually go to the public schools as in-state tuition residents, but at least some other schools are accepting them with lower fees or in-state fees. And some of the students that we work with at Unidos now have actually received, one of them has received a 100% tuition in Florida International University in Miami, and another one at Stetson University here near Tampa. So I mean, these kids are really, really bright. If you give them the opportunity, they will give back a lot to the country. So there are many fallacies, as Maria already explained, those on what immigrants take from the country and what not. One of the ones that I want to make sure you know, immigrants do pay taxes. When you go to Walmart, they don't ask for you to give their green card. They pay taxes there. And so the Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy said that in 2010 alone, immigrants in the state of Florida pay more than $800 million in taxes. It is true that the states and localities have to spend money to educate the children of undocumented immigrants, but throughout their lives, they pay more in taxes than they receive in benefits. And there are many benefits for an immigration reform to pass. Giving a pathway to citizenship for the undocumented will broaden the tax base by $48 billion and produce a surplus of $25 billion in the economy. The immigrants are 30% more likely to open their own businesses, and thanks to the labor of low-skilled immigrants like Blanca, the cost of food, homes, and childcare comes down and more women can go out and work outside of the home. And also, if you regulate the status of the undocumented immigrant, you do background checks, and so you know who are here, who are the people that are here. It's better for our security. I'm going to leave also in the back a form where you can see the phone numbers and contact information of some of our representatives. Bern Buchanan is our House representative in the area. And if you believe that immigration reform is something that needs to pass in our country, I encourage you to give them a call, to write to them, and just tell them how important it is for you and for our area. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Well, it's very interesting to hear these two presentations, very informative, and we're fortunate to have people in the area that can educate us on these matters. It was interesting to hear the history of immigration, and you start to understand when our country was wide open and not very well populated, the borders were open. And then as you saw the country become populated, across the continent of the United States, the regulations started to come in to slow down that immigration. And that is the key to immigration, assimilation. And you look around the world, what we're struggling with immigration is the struggles that are taking place today all across the world. And what's interesting is that some of the countries that have send, or don't send, but a lot of illegal immigrants come to us from those countries are very difficult to get into. And it's just the nature. Countries just want to control their borders. So anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit from a business perspective. I'm in the tomato industry, and here in Florida, we have roughly 20,000 migrant workers in the Florida tomato industry. The Florida tomato industry has a huge impact on our state. It's estimated $500 million to $750 million a year is the impact, the economic impact on our state. And the reality is, without the labor force that we have, there would be no agriculture industry in Florida. Very few people are willing to do the work that is necessary to produce the crops that are produced all across our state. And the reality is we as an industry realize these workers are our partners. Without them, we would be unable to utilize the natural resources that God has given to us to produce the crops that feed our country. We're very fortunate that during the months basically of November through June, tomatoes, and I'll speak to tomatoes that are grown outdoors, have to be produced in Florida or they come from other countries. So it's important to feed our country, and our First Lady likes to talk about the importance of vegetables. We feel like we're trying to do our part, but why are these workers here? As you've heard from the comments that have been made, most of these workers have left their families behind, and I'm going to speak in my presentation to the workers in our industry, and most of those workers are single men. We do have some families, but most of the workers are single men. They have left their families behind in order to find meaningful work to provide for their families. Many of them come into our country illegally, and they procure documentation which they then use to find employment. Now, the reality is, in our industry, most of these workers are not concerned about citizenship. What they want is to be able to work legally. They want to be able to work legally and then be able to go back home. Now, ask yourself, you know, if you could find much better pay in a foreign country on a temporary basis, and I mean much better pay, 3 or 4 times as much as you could get here, would you wish to go there and work? Now, would you want to move there permanently and get citizenship? Probably not. We saw examples of this and seen examples of this for years as many U.S. workers go into the Middle East in the petroleum industry and find jobs that pay 2 or 3 times what they could earn here. They don't want to become citizens of Saudi Arabia, but they do want to be able to earn money there. And that's what's taking place with these workers that come here to work in our fields. They don't have the work back home, and they have families that they provide for. Now, as we heard before, what happens to these workers? What's the downside to them working here illegally? Well, the reality is they're trapped. They're trapped here. You think about it. They can't return home for funerals, holidays, weddings, to visit their loved ones. While they might be able to get back across the border to where they want to go, they know it would be very difficult now to come back. And so the little things that we take for granted, they don't have. They don't have that ability. And then they are preyed upon by those who take advantage of their unwillingness to interact with law enforcement. They're so terrified of being deported. When they're robbed, they don't want to report the crime. And these criminal elements in our community know that and understand that. And they will go out of their way to target these people. And I'll just give you some examples that are very sad. Several years ago, our sheriff wanted to come to the packing house and talk to the workers and let them know, look, listen, if there is a crime, please report it. We want to help you. We're not going to ask you about your status as far as your citizenship status. And when these workers saw the sheriff, and he brought several policemen with him pulling into the parking lot, and I told them all to come into the conference room, they're looking at me like, how could you do this to us? And of course, we explained to them that they were not there to harm them or to try and check on their citizenship. Another sad incident one time that kind of tells the plight of these workers. We had a farm that was adjacent to ours. It was not our farm, that had some workers that were leaving the farm in a car, and it was on a dirt road, and the car was traveling too fast, and the car flipped, and one of the young ladies went out the window and was crushed by the car. And there was someone there, and we were adjacent to it and went over. There was possibly a spouse or a boyfriend that was there with her, comforting her, but as soon as the sirens came, had to leave, and they all ran off. And it just tells you a little bit about what we take for granted and what they have to deal with. And it's a difficult situation because in our industry, we have tried hiring workers, and occasionally you might get some workers from our community who are citizens. But for the most part, those people, the people that live in this community, don't want to do the difficult work that's required. They have other options. And so these workers have come across, and they are willing to do that because it is better than what they have back home. Solutions. You know, we're always going to have arguments and the talk about citizenship, and that is something that is relevant for a certain amount of the workers, and I understand the importance that they place upon that. But for the people working in our fields, and I'm talking specifically in the agricultural community, some type of a green card that is workable, that they can utilize to come over here and work and then go back home and spend time with their families, is something that is important to them. They really, especially the single men, don't really care about citizenship because then they might at some time in the future, but that's not what they're interested in because their families are behind. The present programs that are in place for this type of work are extremely unwieldy and difficult, and so it's very difficult for the growers to utilize those programs. And a big issue that you always hear talked about with the whole immigration issue, and one that was alluded to earlier, is national security. And there are concerns, and there's always going to be concerns. And so if you had a working program with green cards that allowed people to come over, they would be registered, and you would know where they were. So the national security concerns would be taken care of. The reality is it's a very difficult issue. I mean, if we completely opened our borders, we all know that millions of people within a few years would be trying to get in here because it would be a better way of life. And so there's got to be some regulation of that flow to protect our economy. And it's a very difficult issue to deal with because there's so many political sides to it, and when you get two sides to something politically, one side sees an advantage in the other, and so you go back and forth, and a lot of the issues we deal with that cause so much problems in this area really stem from the political side. But the reality is it's a difficult issue. We as an industry, it's the biggest uncertainty in our future is our worker force. And we're fortunate to have these workers. They have allowed our industry to be successful, and we definitely hope that we can find a solution that will be beneficial to all parties in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for adding so much information to this issue. Our three guest speakers have been very helpful. We'll now entertain questions from the floor. If anyone who wishes to ask a question, go to the microphone there so it can get on to the television tape.
One question, where is Unidos now, and do you have information about contact information for it? Oh, Judy Wellman.
Hi, Judy. Unidos Now's office are on 17th Street in Sarasota, in the 17th and 301. We are at the Glacier Sewing Bound Center, and we've been there for a year. Before that, we didn't have an office, and it was difficult for our community to get in touch with us because they like the personal interaction. So it's been really good for us to be at that center, and especially at that center where there are 17 other nonprofits. So we all work together. There's some information on Unidos Now there at the table, and there you can have the phone number and also email contacts for the different programs that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. And a second question for everyone. Is the Path to Citizenship even a viable program, and do you see any realistic options now being discussed at the political level that will really make a difference?
It doesn't seem that way, that there is any real talk about it, but it is feasible. It was done in 86, and it was proof of success. But as Steve said, many people that are here, they just only want to work. They do not care about the citizenship. They just want to work here legally and have a peace of mind that they can live here without the fear of being deported. So it is something that many advocate groups are asking for because being a citizen will give the people a right of being an actual citizen, not residents of second class, like we say it in Spanish. I don't know if it translates correctly, but hopefully it is, because at least it'll be a chance for the people that do want to take that next step, because many people here that are immigrants are so grateful to this country that they want to show it being a citizen as well.
I would agree with Bob in that the people he encounters, I would say, have no desire. They don't come in to gain citizenship. They come in to work. And he's absolutely dead on right that if I had the opportunity, if I had kids to feed and I couldn't find anywhere to work, I am most definitely going to go and find where I'm going to go take care of my family, even if I have to leave and send money back. I think that is a human instinct to protect our families and want better for our families. But I also believe that there's a lot of people that care, and the more they become educated, they see the benefits of citizenship. I mean, when were women really allowed to become full-fledged citizens? Not till 1920, when they were allowed to vote. And how many of our citizens out there take advantage of their citizenship? You know, I think there's a lot that just want to work, want a better life. I also think there's a growing number that want, and I think they should desire to gain citizenship. You know, what that percentage will become in time, I don't know.
My name is Jane Plitt, and I have a question. Is it Bob? Yes, I have a question for you. First, I'd like to just commend the League for presenting what obviously is a critical issue for all of us as citizens, for us as Floridians. And I want to encourage any of you who are not members of the League to consider joining. I have applications because it's only by being informed that we can bring about change. So I just wanted to put a plug in for the kind of programming that's occurring here. But to you, Bob, if it looks like, as it does, that the comprehensive immigration bill is likely stalled, give us some insight about, is there any movement on green cards that would in fact help the tomato industry and other industries? And if so, how can we help that? Thank you.
I can't address that directly, but I can say this. I mean, one of the biggest concerns that you hear expressed is the idea that we have not controlled our border, and that for many years we know people just came across, and especially our southern borders where you hear the most concern expressed. In my observations, the last 3 to 4 years, the southern border has been tightened extensively. I would say I hear that, and I think you probably would hear that too. So as that border is tightened and people observe that, and as years pass, 3 or 4 more years, maybe even before then, people start to feel like there is control of that border, then there's a little more openness to talking about the other parts. And quite frankly, many people said, look, if you're not going to control the border, don't talk to me about what we need to do with immigration if you don't control that first. Well, I think the federal government has done a huge job in controlling that. Whether you agree with it or not, we hear it from workers who try to come here. It's not anywhere near as easy as it used to be, and I don't think as many people are trying to come across that border as used to because of the difficulties they face in getting across the border. And then there is a real possibility of being arrested and caught. So I think there's things that could be done piecemeal, and I think they might be. It's awful difficult to see anything happening in an election year. As we all know, they try to find non-controversial issues to pass. So I wouldn't expect anything before next January and February, and then I would expect a real push, depending upon the outcome of the elections. Either way, I think you'll start to see some attempts to deal with the immigration issue and get it off the table for both parties prior to the 2016 election.
We'll take one more question, please.
Okay.
Bob, this one's for you. I was just wondering, because having these workers is so fundamental to the success of your business. I was just wondering if the growers or Growers Association have united to put pressure on their representatives to actually change the way agricultural, or perhaps create a special agricultural green card, or change the way green cards are issued for agriculture? Because it would seem to me that as a commercial group, you would have some more pressure than individuals.
It is an issue that is extremely vital to our industry, and is an issue that our organizations, our business organizations, lobby our congressional and elected officials on a regular basis. But we're very hesitant to talk about it. And the reason specifically is we don't want to become targets of the federal government. So it's an issue that we work on behind the scenes, but we're very careful on how we do that. But it is vital to us, and we spend a lot of time lobbying on that issue.
First question is, there are 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. and about 400,000 are deported each year. Is there a declining or increasing population of immigrants? Everything I read and what I see indicates that there's a declining population. Next one is, it seems like there is a blind eye policy in place to allow some immigrants to remain in the country. Can you comment on people who are known to be undocumented but are unofficially allowed to stay, such as Blanca? Yes, there are official blind eye, turn a blind eye policies, and I think they're more a common sense approach to a new directive was we shouldn't be deporting parents of U.S. citizen children, barring another problem, criminal history or fraud in trying to apply for immigration documents. Should they really be using their resources to deport parents of U.S. children, of United States citizen children? You know, probably not. They should be focusing their resources on other things. So those policies do exist. Whether certain jurisdictions choose to abide by those directives issued by the administration, the government, is a different story. I'm happy to say that around here they take a very common sense approach in enforcing those policies. Then I have, how are most of the 400,000 immigrants who are being deported discovered? Well, once they're in deportation proceedings, which are now called removal proceedings, that's all documented. We have to rely on the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, we have to rely that they're turning over the real numbers, but that's how we learn. They periodically will send out reports of how many people are being deported, from where. The numbers at the border are a different story, though. I feel they may be inflating the numbers by turning people away at the border, because as Bob said, it has become extremely difficult to get back in. They're very aggressive at the border. They're enforcing the border. They're making it more secure. And the numbers of how many deported may be inflated by the amount of people that they turn around at the border. So, who knows how many people that account for those that are included in the numbers we constantly hear. I've heard that the administration is almost at 2 million deported, more so than any administration. They've deported more than anybody else. That's all I have.
Thank you all again for a wonderful talk. We certainly know more about this subject now than we did at the start of this hour. It's also very important to take part in the decision-making in this issue. It's everybody's responsibility not just to vote, but to be active in government and contact your representatives about this and any other issues for which you have a viewpoint, and you either support or you're opposed to whatever is going on in Congress or the state legislature. Because if they don't hear from you, then they don't have your influence to use in making their decisions. Also, I want to tell you about some upcoming events. Our next hot topic will be on Monday, April the 7th, and that's going to be on a similar topic, voting rights. How can we ensure that everyone who is entitled to vote actually gets to vote? At the same time and place, and the speakers will be Carolyn Gray, representing the Florida League of Women Voters, and the Manatee County Supervisor of Elections, Mike Bennett. And that should be a very interesting talk. I hope you can attend. And another event we have coming up is our annual meeting on Saturday, April the 12th. We're very excited about this because we've gotten Dr. Susan McManus to come, and she's the best known political analyst and commenter in the state. Science at University of South Florida. And she's going to be talking about the current session of the Florida legislature and the issues coming up in election 2014. Anyway, we've got forms back on the table there if you would like to attend that. It's open to the general public as well as our members. But we do hope that you'll decide to join the league as well. We want to thank the Bradenton Women's Club for the use of their hall, and also METV for taping this program for replay on their station and also online on their website. To access it, go on www.metvweb.com. Also see our website, lwvmanatee.org, for more information. And thank you again for coming today, and we hope we see you again soon.